Welcome to Beaver Politics. And it's Wednesday, so you're here with me, the Progressive Moose on the Mossy Side with the Moose. Thanks for coming, guys. Keep tapping that like button. Don't forget, keep tapping. Also, share and let people know we're here and doing the show. Guys, we do have live goals going, so if you do feel compelled, by all means, please feel free. As well, you see that little orange goldish heart up there? Make sure you give that a tap, guys. Become a part of the team if you haven't yet. We would really appreciate it. And let's grow and create a bigger movement for the progressive side of things. That's the goal, is to organize, bring everyone together, and just get the job done for Canadians. Look at that, guys. You are fantastic. You're jumping all over it already. Thank you so much for the love, guys. That was great. Awesome. All right. So, as well, don't forget to check us out over on YouTube. If you happen to miss a live show, that's okay. It gets uploaded to YouTube the next day, and you can catch the whole thing. So, again, head on over to YouTube, guys. Follow us over there, and you can catch up on all the shows you missed. Also, we do have our Discord. If you go to our profile onto our link tree, we have our Discord there. You can join our Discord, be a part of the conversation if they're in there if you want, and just hang out and say hi. That's what it's there for. And with that, guys, just a quick drink, and I'll get right into things. A couple minutes late on actually getting moving, but that's okay. Guys, as I said, tonight's live is about my experiences and why I view things and do things the way I do when it comes to politics and my view on the world. I believe in, bare minimum basic human rights, basic human decency. If legislation, if policy, if politicians don't have that as a bare minimum, I don't want to hear about it in a good way. And you have to use nuance, right? You have to realize that, yes, there's things that are going to help, might not help everyone, or it might not be end all fix all, but that's using nuance. But if you can't have those two basic things at the base of what you're doing in politics, I can't back it, right? And that's how I view everything really around the world. So, how have I gotten here? Guys, I'm going to give you a look through a lens into my life and give you my perspective on things through while I was growing up, seeing what my parents went through, seeing what people around me went through as well, when I ended up out on my own. So let's start at the beginning. So growing up, guys, I was a kid. I was 3, 4, I want to say 4 years old because I was at least kindergarten. My parents split. So, early 90s, when your parents split, it was the stereotypical Papa Roach broken home, right? That's the way it was. And again, I want to make very clear before I get too much into this, I'm at no point looking for empathy or sympathy on any of this. I'm just giving you a full idea as to who I am as a person so you can understand where I come from, and how I view things and why I view the things the way that I do. Okay, so don't ever think that looking for empathy when I'm talking about this stuff. Okay. Um, so yeah, so my parents split when I was younger, which didn't take me long, guys. They argued quite a bit. There was always emotional fights going on. So at an early age, it didn't take me long, a couple years, I realized it was probably best. And my parents did really good, in all honesty. They never fought over us. They never fought about child support, any of that sort of stuff. They took care of it. They handled it, and they got along for the sake of us kids, me and my brother. So that was always good. Got lucky in that sense. Um, and like I said, early 90s, guys. So I was born 1988. I'm 36. And I am what I call myself a elder millennial, where we've got a lot of values and core morals that were instilled in us as elder millennials from our parents and from those around us that we still hold them, but we use nuance and realize that, there's got to be room to move on that stuff, right? So we've kind of got a mix of like millennial versus, um, our older generation morals mixed together at this point. So that's how I kind of, equate my moral standard. And I learned a lot from my parents, of course. So with my mom and dad splitting when I was younger. Dad got to see us every other weekend. There was no arguing about that. They got along in that sense and just made it work for us, right? And I will absolutely say that things weren't perfect. I mean, mom dealt with mental health, unfortunately, and it was a roller coaster for her, especially once they got to when they separated and that whole process. It really took a toll on my mom, right? So it was hard for her to keep up with things and keep going. Um, just for context, guys, like she has depression. She's a little bit of uh, bipolar as well as I believe later on, this was a lot later on, but they actually re-diagnosed with bipolar with uh, schizophrenic tendencies. So, especially knowing what we know now, like my mom was a trooper, right? Because she still got up every day. She still made sure me and my brother were taken care of and everything was done. And she really stepped up through everything she dealt with mentally and emotionally through the earlier years. And I couldn't have asked for anyone other than her. My mom is my hero. I will fully admit that right now to everyone. I don't know how she did it. I still to this day don't know how she did it for all those years. Anyway, so moving on. So mom couldn't work, so she had applied for the ODSP, which is Ontario Disability System, because of what she dealt with, unfortunately, with her mental illness. So yeah, so she applied. But back then, and it's still the same way where you don't just apply once, you have to apply two, three times before, you might actually get accepted. And it was worse back then. Mom was on, um, for lack of better words, welfare, waiting to get on to the disability for 6, 7 years, if not a little longer, right? So we didn't have much coming into the household. Like I said, we were on the welfare equivalent at the time. Two boys, me and my brother, and mom really like she knew how to stretch things. She knew how to make things work. My mom was big on jarring come peach season and pear season, right? Like we had a cold cellar in the basement where come canning time, those peaches and those pears line the shelves in the cold cellar. So that way we got hungry, we wanted something sweet and at least a bit healthy. We went and grabbed ourselves a jar of peaches or a jar of pears and we mowed down on that, you know. Um yeah, and she really learned how to make things stretch. And I remember vaguely still when I was about 4 or 5 years old, you could still take your plastic jugs back to the grocery store and they would give you a refund for the jug. Okay. And that was one thing my mom was big on. Anything she could take back and get those couple cents back for it, she was all over it. She made things stretch, you guys. And I think a lot of people, a lot of parents that weren't in the higher financial aspect of things during the early 90s, that was a big thing. You really had to scrunch and save those pennies up at times because the economy was changing in the 90s. It really was. You were seeing more and more of a push towards consumerism and how capitalistic the system really got, or late stage capitalism, I should say, because that's when the instant gratification started to kind of come into play for society, which really went hand in hand with the internet and how it started to expand because now you had, the information highway at your fingertips right there. You know, you just had to dial in on dial up, and you were on the interwebs. Um, so there was a lot of that in that time period. But yeah, so moving forward, guys, I grew up. My dad saw my dad every other weekend. My parents were split. And again, I realized it was the best thing given who they were as individuals, right? So there was never any bad feelings towards either one of them in that sense. But so mom actually ended up on disability, thankfully, because it's what she needed. So the system worked in that sense. So moving forward, got in my teenage years, and of course, um, especially around that time, grunge became a big thing. Uh, More punk, pop punk, as I used to call it. Um, and it was really like our elder millennials, we were more of a rebellious, especially if you had gone through or were on kind of the bottom end of things in society. Um, you went through a phase where you were rebellious. You got them, baggy legs, snake eye jeans. You had the chain on your wallet. Myself, I had myself a mohawk, and I wore the spike bracelets and everything. Got into all that sort of stuff, guys. We were rebellious. That's what it was. And for me, I'll be honest, because of everything, like my parents splitting and whatnot, now looking back, I was looking for answers. I was looking for lifestyle and the answers to my world views, right? I was looking for something to latch on to. I love that stuff, don't get me wrong. And I mean, power to the people still. I'm still a rebel. Clearly, being a part of Beaver politics. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of what it was growing up in my teens. Um, Fast forward a little bit, and I honestly when I got into high school, I was very, very adamant in finding answers to, life's most complicated questions. So I joined in high school. I went to as many world religion classes as I could. I went to as many history classes as I could sign up to because I wanted to know more. And I did find myself actually reaching out to and becoming a um, uh, part of a church at one point. And I was curious, and I will honestly say, like there was something to it in my mind. Um, so I started going to a evangelical missionary church as a teenager on my own volition, um, thinking that I had found some answers, found what I was looking for, been able to just like soak it in and take in the answers that I'd finally found. Um, yeah, it didn't end up that way. I will say though, it got to the point I got myself baptized as in the church as a teenager. Again, my own choice. So I did go that route, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's one thing I will always say is I don't have an issue with what one individual believes. Everybody has the right to believe what they believe, whatever religion they want to practice is entirely up to them. Okay. I will always advocate for everyone to be able to believe what they do and practice their religion, right? That's basic freedoms in my mind, given what where we live, especially Canada. It's you guys do you, right? But it wasn't for me in the end, guys. There were different aspects, and I realized it was situational. And again, it's my own lived experience. So just because I saw certain things or I noticed different things that really didn't jive with what they were trying to teach me and what they were actually doing at times, it just wasn't my thing. It kind of really soured me away from um, Christianity and religion in that sense. But again, that's me, right? Do I believe there's probably some sort of entity or greater power out there? Absolutely. But do I think that it's something that is far beyond what any human mind can comprehend? Absolutely. Nobody has a damn clue to me, my opinion is nobody has a damn clue what's out there. There's something, and we can't even come close to fathoming what it is that's out there. Okay, so perspective on that. Um, yeah, so I bounced back and forth between my mom's place, my dad's place when I was a teenager. Again, I was a bit of a rebel. My mom dealt with the mental health, unfortunately, issues that she did. And me being a rebel the way I was, I'd take off with my girlfriend for a couple days at a time, or I'd, you know, just kind of run around all night and sleep during the day, miss school all the time, all that sort of stuff. And it took a toll on her. Um, so at one point she did. I was 15 and she asked me to, well, she didn't ask me, she kicked me out. So I was out on my own at 15. My first stop was I rented a room in a retirement home on the top floor. And I stayed there and I started working full time for a construction company, and started making my own money. I had to support myself. So that's when I got my first cell phone because I didn't have anything else really. So I got a cell phone for the first time, used it for work purposes. People could get a hold of me and, into the grind, 15. So it took me time to adjust, and really, I wasn't prepared for it, especially at that age, right? And it really made me see the world different a lot faster than most people at that age would. Absolutely, right? Especially given the amount of responsibility. At that point, you got to take care of yourself or it's sink or swim. So, one or the other, guys. If you're not swimming, you ain't making it. So yeah, so I did move to the city. So I grew up in southern Ontario. I moved to Kitchener Waterloo, which for me, for context, I grew up in the small town. It's called Listowel. At the time, you were averaging 6 to 7 thousand people was the population. So, and a lot of the kids that I went to high school with were bussed in because they were all farm boys or in smaller communities that didn't have their own high schools, so everyone was buzzed in. Like we were right rural, middle of farm country, Mennonite country. I love the Mennonites. We need to kind of move back to how simple. Not shouldn't say simple. It's not simpler, but just in terms of the nonsense we have in modern society, it's simpler. Um, Yeah. So that's how I grew up. So when I moved to the city, I was a small town guy moving into the big city and had no idea what to expect or what I was going to see or how things were going to go. Got myself an apartment right by downtown Kitchener. Um, one of the more noisy and a lot more going on areas in terms of crime and that sort of stuff, but I didn't know any better. All I knew was I need somewhere to live. I could get a job and just take care of myself, right? So into the brutal side of it I went and I made it work, right? I kept to myself, went to work, came home, and I did make some friends along the way. A lot of times it was older than myself. I think 30, sometimes 35 years old when I was like 18, 19. And I looked up to them in a lot of ways. And I viewed them as almost, looking back now, I probably viewed them more of parent figures than anything because I was where I was and I was looking out for anyone that really at that point would show me what I wasn't getting from my parents at the time, right? So, um, yeah, I've had a lot of time to think on my life, guys, especially the earlier years. So this is why I can sit here and say, like, I can sit here and realize now all these different things. At the time, I didn't fucking know any of it. Come on now. Um, I was still rebellious. I was still full of anger over a lot of things. And back then, I didn't have a proper worldview on things. But the city really made a difference because I actually got to see more demographics and I got to see how things actually are in society when people are living so closely together. and how intricate everything is compared to living in a small town surrounded by farmland, right? Um, so it really helped kind of broaden my perspective on things. I moved around Southern Ontario for a while. Um, didn't really find anywhere to kind of set up shop and, you know, call home really. I did end up moving back in with my father for a while. Later on, that was probably about 13, 14 years ago now. Lived with him for a year, got myself back on my feet, and I came up to Northern Ontario where, yeah, I got laid off from, I was working a feed mill down in Southern Ontario. Got laid off, decided to go for a road trip. I came up to Northern Ontario and I never left, guys. Um, so that's a cool thing. I love it up here in Northern Ontario, guys. Um, Now, this is where it starts to get, where I really start to get into politics and I really start to have a more of a worldview and understanding of how things are going on, right? I'm 36. I've been up here 10, 11, probably 11, 12 years now, give or take a year. How far north? So I'm in the Sudbury area of Ontario. Hey, Smarshy. Um, but yeah, so I really started to realize coming from living in the city, more populated areas, coming up to Northern Ontario, smaller communities again, you really start to see the difference um, in mindsets and mentalities, right? I came up here and I'm not saying this is the case everywhere, okay, but there are smaller communities or towns that have points of views that haven't moved on with the rest of the world because they're kind of stuck in their own little bubble, right? If it doesn't happen here, then it doesn't matter. The greater world or globe and everything that's going on around, except for their little community, doesn't matter. They're stuck. This is their world. This is what it is, and nothing breaks in, and nothing breaks out. Um, yeah, so I really became somebody that, yeah, exactly, Jojo. Time warps. There you go. Sorry, just quickly, musician. I lived in the Brantford area for a while. I actually lived in Paris, Ontario, while I was down south for roughly a year and a half. I was in the Paris, Ontario area. So it's a great area. It's really built up a lot too since I've been living down there. Um, yeah. So guys, it's so hard to move to a place like this. Um, Sometimes, especially smaller communities, it's hard to be outspoken on the issues and on politics because, again, just like we see in the United States and we see across Canada, more rural communities tend to be more conservative, tend to kind of be stuck, like Joe said, in a time warp, or just hasn't, moved along or progressed as far as the rest of the area or society has. So um, there's been a lot of different times where I've done things and I get painted out as somebody that shouldn't be around. I'm an outsider, right? Somebody, actually, one of my best friends, I consider him a brother. Um, Big red beard, just like me too. It's weird, but we found each other. Yeah, but I consider him a brother, and he's not from around here either. His wife is born and raised here. They met while she was gone to school. He moved back here with her, and he's gone through the same thing, right? If you're an outsider, if you're not from a small community and you move into one, it's really hard to integrate, especially when you have a more broader point of view of the world because you've lived in different areas and you've been able to see how diverse things really are coming to a town that hasn't had much diversity or open arms for it, in all honesty. Um, yeah, so, I remember. back during when the Black Lives Matter movement happened. I actually organized it here in my town. I went out on my own one day with a sign that just said Black Lives Matter, and I went and stood on one of the main intersections in town by myself. Um, and just I was silent and I stood there. And I had a couple people join me throughout the day, and the group of us actually came together and we managed to do a bigger protest and march in town, which as well our indigenous community came together with us, and they did. I apologize, I can't remember exactly. Um, but they did like a healing dance of some sort, and I apologize, I can't remember properly exactly, but yeah, we did it as a community, and we did it. Didn't matter. Everyone came together and we pulled together and we did it. And after that, guys, it was a fantastic, fantastic day. Okay, and I was really proud of the community, and I still am to this day, and I'll always be. And we came together um, when the news broke about residential schools and what they're finding on old residential school sites, right? And the town pulled together and they did the shoe tribute. Um, and a bunch of people laid shoes out in front of town hall, and make sure. Yes, thank you so much, my Stoner Professor. I love the name. Yes, it was a jingle dress dance. You are absolutely correct on that. Um, but yeah, so we did that, and I kept trying to create different events and keep moving forward with stuff. But really, the town, and again, it is small town mentality where they did the march, they did everything that they did the right thing, absolutely. But after that first initial one, to them it was, well, the problem's fixed, so we're just going to move on, and they thought the problems were solved, and all of a sudden everything was okay, when in fact it's not. As we all know, of course, the fight never ends. So we have to continue to keep moving forward for equality and seeing the changes within the systems, within policing, within government that we still need to see actual equality in every way, shape, or form. Um, right? Exactly, Jojo. So yeah, and I've had issues with. I worked as a contractor in the mill here in town that's closed down now, um, and I saw how the place was run. I was all over that mill as a contractor, right? I really got to know the place, and I can tell you right now, the place was in disarray. They didn't repair anything properly. There were chemical leaks everywhere, yada, yada, yada. List goes on, but they didn't take care of it. So they announced it was going to be shut down. And when I said something in terms of the place was mismanaged, given what I've seen, given being in there and working in that facility, and the town, for lack of better ways of putting it, ended up with a mob mentality on social media, which in turn, I lost my current job because I was willing to speak out against the corporate bullshit, pardon my language, that mill was doing, right? And they didn't like that because that mill had been the bread and butter of town for, years and decades and what have you. How dare you speak ill of the mill? But guys, it's the case. And after I lost my job in town, ostracized me for it, which I'm good. I still work. I still get jobs. But it was a bit of a slog there for a bit. But my point being is, even after all that, reports came out that the mill hadn't turned a profit for over 7 years, right? And it was in the hole, millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars. There was no way they were going to come out of it, right? The company that it was Domtar. They sold it to a company called Paper Excellence. And in all fairness, Paper Excellence tried to fix it up and get it going. It was just too much, and they weren't willing to sink that much money into it, unfortunately, right? But when I call this out, because I went against the bread and butter of the town, I'm an outsider again, which is fine because I'm still going to fight for the rights of workers in this town, regardless of where they work. I'm still going to fight for equality in this town, no matter who's involved or who it affects. I'm still going to fight for everyone because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. And that's why I base my political views and my view of the world based on basic human rights and basic human decency. Okay. And throughout everything that I've lived through, the fact is it shaped who I am now, and it's shaped my perspective and made me into the person that I am, right? And throughout the different hardships, again, I didn't get overly into detail on everything, guys, because we'd be here all night, and I don't want to do that. But push come to shove, it really taught me a lot about the world, and it really taught me a lot in terms of giving back and being there for others. Because if we can't stand up for the people that need it the most when they need it, then we've just lost as a society, right? And especially when it comes to how this system's set up, when if you're already at the bottom, look at where I was, right? My parents split. We were really like we were on the poorer side of things growing up after my mom and dad split. And that was something that really made a difference within my social life. And as much as people might not think that it's a factor in today's society, it still is. It was then and it's still now. If your kid's growing up in a household that isn't so financially secure, you become a target, right? You become a loser. You become someone that other kids don't want to be around and don't care to be. You get picked on, you get bullied, all that sort of shit, right? And the systems are designed to keep those people down, right? Especially with my mom. Look at what happened with my mom. She applied for years trying to get on the proper disability, which she should have been on. But in the meantime, all those years had to live off of scraps under OW, trying to take care of me and my brother. Hell, there was a time, guys, my mom started working a nighttime job. I wasn't old enough. Like me and my brother weren't old enough to be alone, in all honesty, at our ages. But she started working that nighttime job because she didn't know what else to do. And she put herself through hell to make sure that food was on the table. Okay. She couldn't do it, and the system forced her to do it because the system's set up to fail people that are in that sort of position, right? We still see it today. It hasn't changed, right? There's people in my area right now, guys. In my area, the welfare system, quote unquote, Ontario Works is what it's called because I'm in Ontario. Um, there's people that I know that are on OW, right? And it because of the cost of rent right now, they haven't updated the system to be concurrent to what the cost of living is. So a lot of people that are on the quote unquote system, right? What conservatives would say are freeloaders, and that's the actual issue. No, you guys, they don't get enough to even pay their rent, let alone food, let alone all the necessities you need. And if you have kids, good luck, okay? Because they don't give enough for people to live off of, especially if you got a family. Okay, my mom tried so hard, right? But we were always hungry, partially because, I mean, we had high metabolism. So, regardless, I mean, we were hungry. Um, but I mean, it was always, and you used to be able to, you know what my mom used to do? Pork. Pork was the big thing. It was the cheap option, and you could make it stretch, whether it was sausage, pork chops, all that sort of stuff. That's what was the cheap option. And now there is no cheap option for me. It's all fucking expensive. Sparkle Shine, yes, I love it. UBI for all. But that's what I'm saying, right? How long has UBI now been a conversation at this point, right? And it still hasn't happened. Still hasn't come to fruition, right? And Like how long do we need to talk about it? How long does something need to be a conversation before society moves on enough to actually make that shit happen? Again, I apologize for my language, guys. I get a little rah talking about this stuff, but I mean, it's just a continuous generational thing that just it never it it never changes. It hasn't changed, right? And this is what we're fighting for, to see that sort of stuff change. I apologize, guys. A little bit of a dry mouth. If anyone would like to come up and chat, if you've got experience you'd like to share in terms of how the systems are, whether you're in Ontario, anywhere in Canada, like let's come up and let's have a conversation about this stuff, guys. Um, Smarshy.
I literally have like 20 minutes before I have to go to another thing, so I'm just here to give an anecdotal experience, I guess, in a
Hmm.
sense. Because I didn't fill out my paperwork properly the first time. I had to like wait so long before I got onto AISH, and they were giving me $600 a month to live off of. That was to pay my groceries, my rent, or no, rent was included. So they were giving me $600 to pay my groceries, take care of my kids. Um, yeah, it is not enough money to live off of. And I just got a pay raise and still a pay bump in my age, and I still can't afford to make it to the end of the month because I've got groceries, I've got, bills, I've got insurance, I've got adult things I have to do, and I just can't.
Yeah, and one of the something else I'll just quickly point out, guys, is the fact is, again, we're talking about, just the bare minimum. You can't afford groceries, and that doesn't include other hygienic things that you need. If you're like in Ontario, they don't factor in a phone, right? So a phone isn't considered a necessity, so they don't cover phone bills, right? So if your rent doesn't include your hydro as well, then you're kind of screwed for your hydro. It's all these different factors that people don't
Right.
think of.
Absolutely is. And I'm going to
Yep.
tell you this, thank God I don't pay water, only electricity in my building or in my house because I'd be screwed. I would have to, like,
Yep.
I just looked at my utility bill because I got an email utility bill, like an e-bill.
Mhm.
$93. My utility bills are normally like $50.
Yeah. No,
And
exactly.
I'm thinking, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I doing that? So I started telling my kid, I'm like, if you can hang it to dry on the drying racks downstairs, do it. Save
Mhm.
the electricity. Unplug your phone. Yeah, they're like, if I wasn't in low income housing, I'd probably be on the streets right now begging for a place to stay.
Yep.
And I'm thankful I live where I live right now. I am thankful every day. But it's just a matter of time before they come knocking on my door saying, no, you have to get out. Like, we've been bought out. Like, that's what scares me.
Yeah. And in a lot of places, especially I know Ontario, there's a lot less safeguards for tenants at this point. And I think we're starting to see that kind of across Canada.
Yeah,
Angela, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So that's the major concern right now is the fact that people are living underneath poverty, not just poverty. We're talking underneath poverty, and
Yep.
they're just basically trying to survive. Now, how's it possible for someone on Ontario Works to pay to have a shelter of $333? Where are you going to get a place to live for that?
Yeah.
How are you going to survive?
No,
And this is the
absolutely.
issues they were, yeah, sorry. And this is they were
No.
issues they were having here in Ontario, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and this is a good point to bring up right now because we're facing an election right now,
Yeah.
and this is why we should get these things out so people understand. People are not surviving on the system. It's actually gone worse.
Yep.
And
That.
with the with the loss of the fact that we don't have that rent control anymore. So how
Yeah, Doug
people,
Ford.
sorry, yeah, and
No,
how
it's
people,
okay. I was just gonna say the different things Doug Ford has done over time, right? He got rid of rent control. He's made it so developers can essentially kind of poo-poo what they do, and and you have to couple that with Airbnb and how temporary rentals have taken quite a bit of the long-term market and made it into short-term because people just want to make that quick dollar instead of playing the long game in that sense too, right? So coupled issues, and Doug Ford has welcomed it all, right? He hasn't done anything to protect renters, just create it easier for short-term rentals as opposed to long-term.
thank you, because that's factual. And the scary part is that people are not hearing it because of the time of the election and the fact that it's especially because it's 16 months prior to an actual election. It's in February. It's in the midst of the tariffs, right? You know, the
Right.
threats of tariffs coming. And so
Well,
people are not really paying attention and they're not hearing enough.
right. I just want to say this before I jump down this.
Yeah.
I was on Alberta Works. It's like Ontario Works. I moved back to my mom and dad's house. They were overpaying me. Now this was my fault. I didn't communicate it better apparently. Because giving them documentation that I was moving back to my mom's wasn't good enough. Okay. So everything's said and done. There's Angela, can you just mute for a quick second?
I'm sorry? Mute?
Yeah, just mute for a quick second. I'm getting background in my ear.
You didn't mute?
Anyhow,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, um, they had paid me 9.75 every month, like they normally did, and I'm thinking, okay, why am I getting this much? I ended up having to pay $2,400 back to the Alberta Income Support Program, and I'm like, why are you making me pay this back? I said I did not tell you after you guys were overpaying me because I thought, oh, maybe they'll catch it or something, right? Like, yeah, I didn't fucking know. Like, I'm not the brightest bulb in the tree sometimes. Yeah, 24, it ended up being $2,495. Took me 11 years to pay off.
Jesus.
Yeah, 11 years to pay
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to you guys, like, so my mom ended up, like I said, my mom did end up on ODSP, which is the Ontario Disability, and I, I before I ended up out on my own, I did have a part-time job while I was still in school, living with my mom, and nothing was said back then in terms of me working and making money. Like 10 years later, after I lived with my mom and after I'd moved out and was nowhere near disability, then did like a audit, I guess, of her benefits over the X amount of time. And they actually went back and started deducting what she was getting on her check at that point because of money that I had made back when I was a teenager, when at this point I'm in my 20s. Um, and they have the power to do that, which is so messed up to me. Where if you guys didn't do anything about it back then, why in the hell are you dealing with it 10 years later? I'm not in the picture, and she's still getting the same amount, actually less, because she didn't have me under her as a dependent, right? So she was getting less for herself and still expected to pay money back. So I called disability and I told them, like, if you guys want your damn money, I will give it to you. Stop fucking with her check and I will give you what you want from back then because it made no sense for them to take it so many years later.
How much were they taking off her check a month, if you don't mind me asking?
I honestly can't remember. I know it was about 25% of her check is
They
what
they
they were.
only took they were only taking $20 a month off of my checks. That's why it took me 11 years to pay off. I literally just in 2023 paid it all off. Or
Oh
no,
my God.
2022.
Yeah.
So from 2012 or 2011-ish,
Yeah.
2012, 2011, 2012 to 2022, I had finally made 10 years worth of payment, a decade worth of payments.
Yeah.
I
Angela?
know that's the. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
just gonna say, what do you have if you wanted to chime in?
Bye, guys. Love you.
Bye.
Have a good night, Smushy.
I'm sorry about that. It's just true. It's just horrific. I mean, you're on already a system that's broken, and then they're deducting, and you can't even fight it. Technically, you can, but you can't fight it, and that's the
Yeah.
worst part of this all. And that's why these stories have to come out, especially during the election. And we have to encourage more people to go out and vote, because it's kind of like a time where is the message getting out, because we're not hearing enough, because it's not fair to the other parties, right? Because the other parties were just thrown into this, and they're having a hard time, at least they did, to get candidates out there to the different ridings, right?
Yep.
And and then on top of it, we're dealing with the threats of the tariffs and everything like that. And people are looking at Ford right now, and they think he's doing a great job with the tariffs, right? And it's kind of taken away from the election, in my opinion.
Yep. No, absolutely, and that's where like he's running this election under getting the mandate to deal with the tariffs. When I mean, I've said it before, he already had his mandate from the last election. I don't know why he needed one for this. Though I will say, like, if somehow we manage to get him out, then I mean, it's not a complete waste. Um, but yeah, guys, like even talking about Doug Ford in Ontario, he's been one. He said, he ripped up the deal, the Starlink deal with Musk, and then just turned around and just signed another one anyway. So he didn't actually do anything. It was all performative because people saw that he ripped the first one up, but they don't realize that he signed the second one.
See, there's a message that needs to be taken out there. And a lot of people don't realize it, because I was talking to people that I know, and they say he's doing a good job. But do you see that the expenditures and everything that he's been doing as well? And the fact that
Yeah.
he wants to do that tunnel that's going to cost
Yeah.
billions of
See,
dollars?
the tunnel, it's hard to say. Like, I feel like the tunnel isn't going to go anywhere, whether he actually wants it to or not. But I honestly feel like the tunnel is just a distraction from other stuff,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it could
right?
be.
I mean,
It's
who
true.
knows? Like, it's very off to me that, especially being the size of it that he's talking about, it would literally end up being the biggest underground tunnel in the world for a highway, right? So it's like to jump into the deep end on something when you have no experience doing this sort of shit. Like, what are you doing? Sorry, my language again. Uh,
Yeah, it's true though, because
yeah.
that money obviously can go into our healthcare system, and I don't think it's sometimes you have to remind people how bad our health system is. And
Hmm.
I don't think they're getting the message, because they go to the hospital, they see they're not paying for it, but they're not seeing the other things that potentially that is happening, like the shoppers drug mart, the privatization in clinics, right?
Hmm.
So that and doctors leaving the field, right? Like
Well, and
doctors are
that's
leaving. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to bolster your point, and I've said it before, look at when the pandemic was in full force, so to speak, right? Especially in Ontario. I know there were other provinces as well that had, Canadian forces go in and help in long-term care facilities because the private ones didn't have enough staffing and they couldn't take care of their residents properly. So the Canadian Army stepped in to help, and Doug Ford was one. I believe there was a couple other provinces as well that made promises of get trying to move away from the privatized care in that sense. And Doug Ford swore up and down that he was going to annihilate the private sector in terms of care homes and bring it back to the people. and yada yada yada. But he completely did the opposite, and we're actually paying public tax money to private clinics to make up the difference on surgeries, and we're actually paying them more than we would the public sector. So, we're not getting funded properly. And you're right, there are different things where there it's going good, right? There are different avenues that work for the smaller scale stuff. But in terms of how Doug's doing it, and we see it in Alberta with how, look at the AHS and the scandal right now in Alberta, right? With Danielle Smith and the people around her, what they're doing to healthcare there, right? It's the same playbook where you're trying to privatize it more and essentially do away with the public option, which is complete and utter nonsense.
Exactly. Because
And it's walking back the progress that Canada's done over what the Americans have done so far.
exactly, we're supposed to have universal health care, and
Yeah.
there, and certain conservatives, premiers, are privatizing it.
Hmm.
And so they're going into, like you said, the American style, which they can't do completely, but they're heading towards like some of the structure of it. And
Yep.
that's what's so scary about it, because people don't understand that. Like people who have, let's say you're working and you have health care insurance. So sometimes you kind of miss out on the fact that even though you have it, that doesn't cover a lot of things, right? And a lot of
Yep.
people here in Ontario are working and do not have health care. Like I don't have health care right now, which means that when I go to pay for any of my medications, I got to pay out from my own pocket. Nothing is covered through OHIP.
Yep.
Antibiotics, my
And you're
private.
lucky. Yeah, exactly. And you're lucky in today's day and age, in today's society, and how uh, just bad the corporate aspect of things are. If you can find a job that, for everyday Canadians, if you can find a job that actually gives you benefits and, covers how has health coverage in different ways, has dental coverage, right? I equate to dental because I'm somebody, guys, I really do try to hide the inside of my mouth because I know how bad it is. But I mean, it's one of those things where if you don't have the benefits through work, you can't afford this stuff on top of just trying to get by and keep your belly full and a roof over your head in today's society.
Exactly.
Um, which I will plug quickly here just because I just mentioned it, guys. As of January 25th, the federal government is accepting applications, so you can go fill out an application under the dental program. There's no age restrictions at this point. Everyone is eligible, so everyone's able to apply. Not saying you're going to get accepted, but it's open to everyone now to apply. So if you've been waiting for this, because there has been different age restrictions, more so towards elderly and higher age and lower age. Now the middle is being included in it all as well. So keep that in mind, guys. If you've been waiting for it, it's available, except for in Alberta. Yes, thank you very much, Desiree, for pointing that out, except for in Alberta because Danielle Smith is a douche.
Hmm. Sorry to say that, but she is.
Well, I might get in trouble for saying that on my live,
I
but
know.
we'll see. Um,
Yeah, I feel for people in Alberta because so many there that really are being hurt by this. Like with their health care, because she is denying everything that the federal government is offering. Like you're supposed to be for the people.
mhm.
Like keep your politics aside, right? You may not be. I'll let her talk, say, or him, or whatever.
No, it's okay. Finish up.
Oh, sorry. I just meant to say that you're supposed to be for your people, and that should be your priority, and put your politics aside. So then you can continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier is I base all my political views on basic human rights and decency. If I have something or if I think it's bare minimum, everyone should have the same. It shouldn't be based on how much you know, what 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 you've been born into in different aspects of life. There's so many different branches off of that, but it shouldn't be based on what you've been born into. It should be based on having the bare minimum across the board.
Yeah.
Uh, Maud, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure.
What's up? What do you got to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I just like it just really upsets me that Canada still. Well, I guess this is true of a lot of countries. We still aren't giving like basic rights to a lot of different individuals. Like, I know that like people who are born have rights, but like the unborn doesn't have rights yet, and like animals don't have rights yet, and I think they should have rights. So it's just kind of upsetting that like no country is taking action to do that.
Well, there are animal rights advocacy groups, and there terms of unborn, I don't know if I agree with you on that one, to be honest. Um, I mean, that there's a whole philosophical and religious debate that can be had from that one. What about in terms of what we're seeing, again, cost of living versus
Mhm.
what any of the governments are doing at this point to fix things?
Yeah, like I don't really know what party is the best to vote for. Um, I know that Pierre Polyev said he's gonna fix it. Like he's gonna fix like the house issues. I don't know if that's true. I'm very skeptical about a lot of the claims that various parties have been making.
Mhm. No, and you have the right to be, right? And we won't actually know until we see how the government layout is going to go moving forward once they sit back in Parliament on the federal level, and make up, what it's going to be in terms of who's going to be the official government, who's going to be opposition, what the numbers are going to be, and how we move forward. I think so far, in all honesty, the Liberal government had numbers have shown to be effective in terms of the infrastructure for building new homes, as well as the new homes number has increased. Might not be what they planned on or on target at this point, but they definitely have been given, like Trudeau said, the old military, gung ho.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they got to cut back on like immigration because I feel like we can't even afford like for our own citizens, and we're like letting.
So, but before you move forward, let's just
Oh,
clarify that
sorry.
on both federal and provincial levels, immigration has been slowed down. The federal government has addressed this along with the provincial governments because
Hmm.
a lot of times the immigration and even temporary workers, refugees, all the different stuff is negotiated with the province and is based on what the premier and the government of the provinces want, more so than the federal government. So keep that in mind as well.
Oh yeah, maybe. It just seems like, at least to me, that like we're prioritizing them over like like Canadian born citizens. Like obviously,
So so
them.
and here goes to my point. Okay, so a lot of the people that do come to Canada in any way, shape, or form are looking for a better life, looking for the same rights and same opportunities that I have, that you have, that anyone else should have, but they don't have wherever they're coming from to come to Canada. Do
Yes,
you understand that basic
yes,
concept?
I understand that, but I feel like it's not really fair to the Canadian citizens because a lot of our Canadian citizens don't even have those things, right? Like they're Canadians for the
Okay,
rest.
okay, but what makes a Canadian? Let's put it this way: what makes somebody born in Canada more important than somebody that wasn't born in Canada when they should have the equivalent of basic human needs, which is food, water, roof over your head, all by international law?
Because they have a stronger entitlement to the land.
Who does?
Uh, the Canadian born citizens.
Do they? Because
Yeah.
as far as I know, before this was Canada, it was Turtle Island, and anyone that wasn't here or has ancestral ties to that, we're
Mm-hmm.
all technically immigrants under definition,
No, by
right?
immigrant,
So,
so I guess I'll just specify what I mean by immigrant. So by immigrant, I just mean someone who moved to the country who wasn't originally born here. So I mean, like,
Okay, but
wait,
again, I mean, semantics at that point because we're living on stolen land is my point, right? So who are we to dictate when we're living on stolen land
what? Wait, so
what
because
happens?
because like white people like 600 years ago stole land, we should let other people steal land? I don't think
Treaty
that's
Bird, you want to chime in on this
I
one?
sure do, my friend. Thank
You
you.
have the floor.
Okay, and sorry, I was in and out because I had to drop off for a minute. I just got in when I caught this conversation. So, and I mean no offense to anybody. And there are three classifications of people in this country: indigenous, immigrant, or refugee. Everybody that has come here from other lands are of immigrant stock. So you might have great great grandparents or even great 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 grandparents that came over from some other land, and you are now the descendants of them. And yes, you're Canadian and were born on Canadian soils and could even claim to be native to this land. You know, that's a term that's, can be used. It depends, but I would be cautious on what company you use that in. And I think where some of the struggle with this is, and I have this conversation in Alberta a lot, is that people see immigrants as a negative term. And we want to use it against, especially in my observations, when it comes to the brown colored immigrants. We
no, I
like
don't
to
think it's I
talk
don't.
about them. But everybody that has come here that was not here and like ancestrally, our roots go back 15,000 years at least, according to the archaeological record. And there's even evidence being presented now that shows that the Bering Straits and that land bridge wasn't necessarily the only way that we came here. There's some truth to that, and that was a migration, not an immigration, because there was no countries at that time. But there are also some interesting sites being uncovered and discovered in South America that predate that Bering Straits bridge. And so, there's still a lot of diving down into this to be done, and research in archaeological records and stuff. And it's not offensive to be an immigrant. Like your whomever, if it was your grandparents or your great grandparents or great great, they immigrated here. I too have immigrant grandparents
Okay, but that
who
doesn't mean that
came
you're an
here.
immigrant.
So, but I also have indigenous grandparents, an indigenous parent. So I'm indigenous and also an immigrant.
Look, there's a contradiction. So someone who's an immigrant is just going to be someone who moved to the country who was not born here. That's what an immigrant is.
No, that's not.
Well, that's just how I'm using the term. Okay, whatever. It doesn't really
Okay.
matter. This is just a semantic dispute. I'll just say that people who are born here have a stronger entitlement to the land than people who are not here currently.
Okay. And this is what brought me up because this
Yeah,
entitlement to land conversation.
yeah.
So, what treaty territory do you live in?
Ontario.
No, what treaty territory?
Not relevant.
It's completely relevant
Okay, can you
because
establish that?
before this was Canada, it was treaty lands. Now, some
Yeah,
parts of Ontario, from what I understand, are unceded, and there might be friendship treaties, peace and friendship treaties. They're different than some of the numbered treaties as you go west. I'm mostly familiar with the numbered treaties, but you should familiarize yourself with whose traditional territories you are on,
I don't think it's.
because that's who has complete entitlement to land.
Wait,
Those
no,
people.
no. Wait, that's like a very Zionistic argument.
No, it's
Um,
not. It's a legal
Yeah.
argument because Canada, like
Zionists.
the British Crown, signed treaties with the Indigenous people here to allow for the sharing of these lands.
Wait, are you a
So
Zionist?
I'm an indigenous person. I'm happy to have people come here from other lands. I really enjoy learning about other cultures and meeting new people. I find people very interesting, and I think it's pretty cool when I get to meet folks from Africa and India and China, wherever, Ukraine, Russia, like whomever comes here. I'm always happy to meet people as long as they're happy to understand the role they play in this treaty partnership.
Okay, maybe I can specify the question.
Okay, so I'll mute now. But I really welcome. I'm glad that and I mean ill intent or anything. And a lot of folks. The sad thing is that it's never been in the curriculum for folks to learn this history. A lot of newcomers that came here, going back to our great grandparents, even were taught to not like or trust First Nation people or Métis people. They were taught that we were drunks, thieves, savages, all of these things, right? So it's not, I don't blame anybody, but now is the time for us to have these conversations and just change the story and get to know the real story, right? So I welcome everybody to these lands, but it's just all we ask is that understanding and respect that the lands are Indigenous lands first, that we've agreed to share with all of you in kindness and in peace.
No, so I disagree with that. So the reason I disagree with this is that, like what happened to the indigenous people was a very long time ago, especially like the initial
But
taking.
it wasn't.
No, it
Hold on,
happens
hold
to
on.
us
But it
every day.
wasn't.
When do you think the indigenous people were conquered by?
Hold on. Shh. Shh.
That's not
Yeah.
answering
Thank
the
you.
question. So
I
Thank
know.
you.
sorry,
Okay,
can I
hold
ask
on
the
a sec
question?
here. Okay, I'm just gonna mute you. Just be quiet for a minute. Okay? And I talked
And
about this earlier today on a different live, guys. I thought it was 1996, but it was 1998 that the last residential school in Canada was actually closed. So you want to sit there and say it happened a long time ago when I was in school
yeah.
being taught as a child
Not the
as
question
people
that I
in
asked you.
residential schools.
Wait, can you try to reproduce the question that I asked?
Did we go
No,
on a
because at
tangent?
this point it's
You're not
irrelevant
willing to even
because
reproduce, so you don't even know what question I asked you. So you just answered a question you didn't even know what I was asking. What's wrong with you?
no.
I'll just repeat the
I was
question.
correcting you on your point of view,
What was my
right? Because
correcting me
you
on what?
said
I don't
all
even know
this
what the
happened
question
a
was.
long time ago.
Not what I
No,
said.
it didn't.
No.
It's
And I
relevant and it's now.
That's not what I said. What I
and
said was
if I
that the
could
initial. What I said was that the initial taking of the land.
Shh.
okay, wait, there was no taking of the land and we weren't conquered. So we signed
What?
treaties. Nations sign treaties. Treaties don't create nations. So that is
Listen for a
right
little bit,
there.
dude.
That the British Crown signed treaties as acknowledgement that we were nations. Because we don't sign treaties with just anybody. Like the British Crown would not just be out signing treaties willy nilly. They acknowledged that these were nations living here. We were not conquered. There was an agreement to share. Now, today, to this very day, our rights are being infringed upon, violated. Our resources are being taken from us. Our people live in much lower standard than the rest of Canadians do, and off of we don't even have access to good jobs, education. You couldn't get past a grade 9 education if you're an Indian up until the 1960. You know why? Because they didn't want to have smart Indians. You couldn't get a lawyer because didn't want us to fight in court. That was illegal. It was illegal for Indians to get lawyers. So this still goes on today. You like you mentioned it like this is something that went on in the
No,
past.
that's not what I was saying. What I said is that the initial taking of the land happened in the past. So I'll just ask a question.
Right.
Why is it the
Okay.
case that Indigenous people moved from southern Canada to the territories? Why did that happen if the land wasn't stolen?
I'm not sure I follow you.
What?
There's no
Wait,
First Nations moved to
do you agree that Europeans stole land from the Indigenous people, or do you
no.
disagree with that? No.
I
So there
well,
is like
yes.
oh, so you do agree? Okay,
I
awesome.
know. I agree that no. Listen, hang on. They wrote treaties with us, and then they violated the treaties. That's where the stolen land comes from.
Okay, and when
They
did it happen?
it happened it started happening in 1867, and it still happens today because we're writing modern treaties in BC and some in other provinces.
Okay.
Sorry, our smoke detector just went off. I'll mute.
Yeah, awesome. I can make a comment on that. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to say that the land was stolen in the 1867, I mean, first of all, I think that this is obviously false. I think that the indigenous people in the 1700s would probably disagree with you when they were being pillaged. But, let's just ignore that. Let's just pretend that it
What?
was in the 1867. Even if that was the case, that wouldn't be relevant because that happened too long ago, such that the indigenous descendants are going to have a strong entitlement to the land, right? Or at least they would if granted. But this doesn't negate the entitlement that people have who were born here. Look, if you're born somewhere, then
Oh,
you have
yes,
an
it
entitlement
does.
to that land.
Okay, this goes all the way
All right.
back to the Royal Proclamation. I think it was 1673. And that's when the Pope, or King George, actually, the third, I think it was, acknowledged Aboriginal title to land. And he also said that we would believe that British Crown would be leaving the Indians, as what we were referred to then, unmolested. But that wasn't that commitment too was broken. Then they signed treaties with us to access lands and resources. And those treaties said we were share lands and resources. Those treaties never said anything about Indian reserves. So the next thing they did after they got the treaty signed, then they enacted the Indian Act, which set aside reserve lands. And the Indian Act says that the government of Canada has jurisdiction over Indians and lands reserved for Indians. And it says that in the Constitution Act of Canada also. So we also, here's another little tidbit. I see that he's gone, so maybe he's not even listening anymore. But we have constitutionally protected rights because Indigenous people in this country have been able to prove historically through all of these agreements, treaties, proclamations, you name it, that we have those rights, and those rights are enshrined in all of that history. And now it's enshrined in the Constitution. And we continue to win at the Supreme Court of Canada all the time. And this costs tax dollars or taxpayers a ton of money. And I'm a taxpayer too. And do you think I like it when my tax dollars are being used to fight my rights? And if you just think about how much more of that money could be utilized into the services and things that Moose here's talking about tonight, and redirecting that into supporting Canadians rather than fighting the first peoples of this land. So, I welcome you, Modality, to join us on Monday night. We talk about Indigenous matters. I welcome these conversations. I really feel bad that your education system failed you,
I
and
don't even
all
think
of
he's
us.
Canadian. I was looking at his profile and all his content is American. He
Oh,
might be Canadian, but I
Okay.
suspect he's not. I think he's just baiting.
right.
I could be wrong. I can't say for sure, but I didn't see any Canadian content creators on his profile.
Well, hopefully we've
Oh.
schooled them a little bit then, because things are a little bit different up here. And even in the United States, there were treaties, but the USA violated those treaties and basically scrapped them because they weren't
Mhm.
signed with the Crown. Here we have the British Crown, which is really, there's an honor to the Crown. And this is something a lot of folks don't maybe know about, the concept of the honor of the Crown. So both Canada and the provinces are to be acting in accordance with the honor of the Crown. And that relationship that they have with Indigenous Canadians is rooted in the honor of the Crown. So, anyways, I'm glad I jumped in when I did.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining in the conversation. That's fantastic. You were able to articulate and have more knowledge in terms of what the conversation was. So I really appreciate the fact that you did jump up.
Well, thanks for
Absolutely.
letting me have a place to speak and talk about these issues because they're important. And I'm really apologize if I come across ever as like a little bit heated or anything because these are personal matters,
Oh
right?
my
These
goodness,
are
you're so nice compared to what I would be. So you're very patient. I don't think you come across as harsh at all.
okay.
Uh, Considering the topic, you're very, very kind.
And I am not a treaty expert by any means. There are folks who, they know treaties inside and out and its history of all of it. But I've been around long enough to speak to it. And if we ever, maybe one night I'll do a more deeper dive into histories. All right.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm over time here, which is fine because I think the conversation definitely warranted it and it was fantastic. Uh, Jaina, do you have anything you want to add before we kind of wrap things up here tonight?
Oh no, I'm good. I just wanted to hop up because he was just being really I don't even know the petulant, just yeah, just not admitting that he was completely wrong. He didn't have any idea what he was talking about. It was kind of rude.
Yeah.
But
And
All
people
right.
that are
there's a good
interested,
word for it. Just completely dismissive, like it happened a long time ago. Like that doesn't change anything. It still happened, and it still matters. That's like saying, "Oh, the Holocaust happened years ago. Why do we care about that?"
right?
You
Why
know,
do we have
you don't just
Remembrance Day?
dismiss this stuff.
I know.
Like we have Remembrance Day. We do all these things, and anyways, there's so much I could say, but it's
Yeah.
been you have your hour. And just so you know, Canada is winning the against Sweden right now
Oh yeah, that's
in the
cool.
Four Nations game. So go
Go
Canada!
Canada.
Go
Woo!
Canada.
Yeah. Angela, anything you want to add before we wrap things up here?
Well, I just hope that we get more information out there to help people before they make the decision to vote in Ontario because it's an important election. And I guess a lot of people don't understand that your everyday needs falls underneath your premiers. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to forget how important the role of the premier is because they have a huge amount of responsibility.
Absolutely. Guys, and just to highlight quick here, pumpkin spice in the comments. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Smartvoting.ca, guys. Go on over there. Fantastic site. Yeah, bolster that one. Share that one around. Smartvoting.ca. And with that, guys, awesome. Angela, where can people find you outside of when you come on to Beaver Politics?
Really? So I just have my own, which is Angle on Fire. So it's at Angle on Fire 63.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. As well, Treaty Birder and Jaina, if you each want to take a minute here to plug your shows and tell us a bit more if you can.
Sure. Did you want to go first, Pretty Bird?
Sure, I can do that if you don't mind, just because supper is just about ready. Um, Yeah, so every Monday night at 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, you're welcome to join me on Beaver Politics for Indigenous Matters, where we talk about Indigenous issues in this country. Um, Everybody's welcome. You don't have to be Indigenous to join us. You don't have to be Indigenous to be on the panel. I do have some rules about how we conduct ourselves in accordance with our talking circle, but I can share all of that with you. So please join me on Monday nights 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you.
Awesome. And my show is called Breaking the Dam, and it is on Saturdays from 12 noon to 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that would be 2 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And the focus is on mental health in the current political environment. So haven't decided on my topic yet for this week, but it's probably going to either be self-care, radical self-care, or the other topic I was considering is how to handle family and friends who are on the other side of the political spectrum, because that can be a real challenge. So,
I can agree with that
Absolutely.
one.
yeah, awesome.
Perfect. Love it, guys. Love it. Thank you so much for joining in. I appreciate everyone that came up to speak on tonight's episode. Really appreciate it, guys. And remember, we need to look at the systems and how outdated a lot of them are, and how it's really time to retool things and get them so people can actually survive off of these social programs that are meant to help us in our times of need. That was my main point and focus for tonight's episode, guys. I really appreciate all the love. I do see the misses in here, which I was just about to plug, guys. Tomorrow, the missus is back on the navigation station. So, guys, go tomorrow. Make sure you join her at 1 p.m. Pacific time and 4 p.m. Eastern over on the navigation station. Wonderful content, wonderful topics and conversations, guys. So don't miss that. And I guess that wraps up for tonight. So, guys, stay safe, stay sane, and take care of your loved ones. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
So much.
Have a good night, everyone.